Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Obviously, lots and lots of big news, starting with that monumental, era-defining decision overturning Roe versus Wade, and that is where we will start the show. But there's a lot to talk about with that. We've also got some new insight into Trump's reaction to that, what he's saying publicly, a little different from what he is saying privately about the political impact, at least. Also, some big developments with regards to Ukraine and Russia. G7 meeting this week that is levying more sanctions on Russia, trying to deal with the fact that the sanctions thus far, especially the oil sanctions, have only actually enriched Putin's regime. So we're trying to figure all of that out. We also have some new details. Liz Cheney, who is very much on the rocks in terms of her Republican primary, and she had said, no, I'm not going to court Democrats. I'm just going for Republican voters. Now she's sending mailers out to Democrats, explaining to them how to switch their vote. That seems to be the only shot she has at ultimately getting through that primary. Also, wanted to spend just a minute reflecting on Nancy Pelosi's incredible response to the overturning of Roe versus Wade. I know you guys are really going to enjoy that one, so that's something to look forward to. Also have Derek Thompson back on the show. He's been digging into the airlines are a complete mess.
Yes.
I don't know if any of you guys have flown recently, but the number of canceled flights, and it's completely preventable. They know that they don't have the staffing and the crews to fly all the flights that they are booking people on. So it's completely egregious. The person who is in charge of the agency that should be dealing with this is Pete Buttigieg. He, of course, is like MIA on all of this. So Derek's going to dig into all of that. But we wanted to start with that decision overturning Roe versus Wade. And in particular, we have some new polling that breaks down just how Americans feel about this. And overwhelmingly, the picture is, of course, Republicans broadly supportive. Independents and Democrats feel very, very differently. And overall in the country, this is a very unpopular move by the Supreme Court, further undercutting that court's legitimacy, which was already at record lows. Let's put this first part up on the screen. This is from CBS News and YouGov. So they asked whether overturning Roe versus Wade is a step backward for America, a step forward for America, or neither. 52%, so an outright majority, say a step backward. Only 31% say a step forward. The remainder, 17%, say neither, sort of indifferent. Next one, let's put this up on the screen. This is what I was just referencing about the sort of partisan breakdown here. So look, it's kind of predictable. Democrats overwhelmingly disapprove of the decision, 83-17. Republicans overwhelmingly approve of the decision, 78-22. But if you look at the ones that count, the swing voters, the independents, 62% disapprove of this decision. So no doubt about it, however you personally feel about the overturning of Roe versus Wade, there is no doubt that this decision is dramatically on the wrong side of public opinion. And the last piece we wanted to show you here about how this might impact the midterm elections. In particular, of course, Democrats have been suffering from a lack of enthusiasm as compared to Republicans who super revved up to vote in the midterm elections for, sort of historic reasons. You always want to vote against the party in power, all of that sort of stuff. So you have 50% of Democrats saying that this decision by the Supreme Court makes them more likely to vote. That's opposed to just 20% of Republicans. So, I always am a little skeptical of these things because even people's impression of how they are going to act based on things, people don't always know
People
really
are terrible
is this gonna,
judges of what they're gonna do.
Exactly, how they're actually going to act on this decision. But I think if you look not just at this polling, but if you look at the way, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, some of the really radical and extreme measures that Republicans are leaping into right away, there is no doubt that this is going to shift the direction of the midterms a bit in favor of Democrats. Now, do I think that's enough to overcome what were dramatically long odds and what looked like a total disaster for Democrats? No. Do I think on the margins or with some particular candidates it might make a difference? Yes.
I actually like the way that you put it at the top, which is an era-defining decision, because that is the better way in order to conceive of it. The things that have ramifications, they don't necessarily immediately occur. They don't just happen. What happens is that when you live in a new era, you have a whole new set of challenges, of coalitional differences, of the way that politicians are going to have to react to different incentives. We'll talk about this both in Trump, and I'm going to be talking specifically a lot about this in my monologue. What I think it is that this creates an entire new set of political conditions, which introduces a dramatic amount of uncertainty into the system. Now, currently, the 2022 midterms, I think those are locked in. I mean, I don't see how that could possibly have an impact. That being said, this could be, in the long term, a decision that will put Republicans, what I think, very much on the back foot of having to defend some extraordinarily unpopular decisions, what is still, though, a very, very powerful part of their political coalition. And I think that underlying this is a huge break in what traditionally defined the American right. Social conservatives and many others were willing to go along with the big tax cut Republicans and with others because they were promised that Roe versus Wade was going to get overturned. It was the singular promise of every Republican president since Ronald Reagan came into office. Now, though, that has completely scrambled court politics, both in the ways that Donald Trump was elected almost entirely on an intercoalitional basis by selecting Mike Pence and saying, I'm going to overturn Roe, which is why those Republicans, those evangelicals, are willing to walk over broken glass in order to vote for him. Remember this, only 3% of the electorate in 2020 was voting on abortion, and over 97% of those people voted for Trump. Now, what's the reason? I mean, I guess you want to go ahead and award somebody for doing what they said, but let's be honest, overturning something, taking the action, is the immediate impetus for a lot of these people to vote. And I already saw this, no matter what you think, Josh Hawley had made a really interesting comment, which is he said, for years, social conservatives were willing to go along with the tax cuts and the trade deals and all this stuff on judicial philosophy. That is over. We'll see in terms of how he votes and how he comports himself. I do think there's something there, which is that for a long time, there was this idea in Republican Reagan politics specifically called like a three-legged stool, which is neocons on foreign policy. Then you had the tax cut, Art Laffer types who were really not socially conservative at all, those two groups. But then you had, the evangelicals. And those three kind of made up the coalition. Trump scrambled that a little bit on foreign policy, obviously in terms of the way he governed both as a neocon-ish and then same whenever it came to tax cuts. But the social cons kind of remain that. With the stool, one leg is now gone. So what does that mean in terms of how you navigate a primary, how these people are going to vote? That's why I think looking at it as an era-defining decision in terms of how the Republican Party is going to have to operate. Also the Democratic Party. I mean, there's major fissures. You and I were talking about this yesterday. I've never seen the amount of kind of like PMC women who are repulsed by the major Democratic Party. That's a totally new phenomenon in terms of their like faith, I guess, and the Nancy Pelosi's. And I mean, look, if you were an RBG stan and you had an RBG bobblehead or a bobblehead or whatever here in DC, her face is everywhere. I mean, there's no person whose narcissism more is responsible for this decision by her inability to retire when she should have under Obama. If she had not done so, then Justice Roberts is on record saying he would have stuck with a 15-week ban.
That's very much where he wanted this court to go.
That's where he wanted it to go. He wanted the Dobbs actual ruling to be the law of the land under Roe versus Wade. So you have nobody but RBG to thank. I think a lot of people are coming to this realization politically.
I think so. And this is part of what I'm going to talk about in my monologue that, I've spoken before about my politics and why abortion isn't necessarily at the center, even though, I do find this decision, frankly, I find it horrifying. I mean, I do think this court, they really don't care what public opinion is. They really don't care how it could damage the institution of the court. And I don't so much have an issue with that because I'm not a Supreme Court fan anyway. I think even though obviously in certain instances, Civil Rights Act being a great example, the court has moved the country forward more often than not. They've made terrible decisions which are reactionary and regressive, this being clearly one of them in my opinion. On the Republican side, I wouldn't say that the third leg, the evangelical, religious right is gone. I mean, we see them springing into action because even though the court's logic here is, let's let the states decide. That is not what most of the religious right wants. They want this to be national, nationwide policy. I mean, Mike Pence, who is one of the key, clear leaders, beloved on the religious right, the first thing he says is, hey, national ban, we got to go there. There's already been legislation introduced by Republicans in the House and the Senate to do exactly that. So they're not going to be satisfied. It says everything that they leapt into action, not to say now we need to have affordable childcare and make sure no baby grows up in poverty. No, what they leap into action to do is to say let's get DAs to prosecute women who now cross state lines to try to get an abortion in states where it is illegal. So, there's a lot of demands for governors in states that have already more or less banned abortion to call a special session and ban it even harder. There's pressure on DeSantis down in Florida, who just passed what was, already an extraordinary and contrary to Roe ban, 15-week abortion ban. Well, there's pressure on him now to call a special session to do a 6-week abortion ban. So I think that the momentum and the energy from the religious right is still very much there, very much focused on this issue. And it really shifts the locus of the culture wars. So whereas we have been, and I think you're going to get into some of this in your monologue, we have been having this, discussion about woke overreach and, cancel culture and policing language, which I think Republicans had a major advantage in that conversation, even though personally I think they're, hypocritical on a lot of those things in ways that we've talked about. But there's no doubt that they sort of leaned into this. We got to have free speech and people got to be able to say what they think. And it was working in terms of prosecuting the culture wars. Well, now you got a very different issue on their hands. Who wants to go out and defend criminalizing women who are trying to, not even just get an abortion in their state, but cross state lines to get an abortion? As unpopular as defund the police was, this shit is even more unpopular. So good luck defending that. And that, because this is such a powerful part of the Republican base, and because so many congressional districts are drawn in a way that these are safe Republican districts, they're not worried about a Democrat or a moderate Republican. They're worried about challenges from their right. So you have a coalition that is organized, that is determined, that is feeling confident because they've just scored this, huge multi-decade victory that they've been working for. They are not going to stop here. And I think it is a real wake-up call for, people who are against this decision, that, these kind of rights that we've taken for granted for generations can be rolled back like this. And there's been a lot of liberal complacency that, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, that I think has just been completely overturned. Even things that, we've kind of put behind as take for granted, certainly gay rights, right to contraception, all these things that Justice Thomas said in his concurring opinion that agreed with the majority, but laid on his view that he says, hey, if we're going here with abortion, we should be going here using the same logic with all of these other issues. So it is a real eye-opening kind of a moment. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.